Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Ghosts and Spirits video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's start this whole new chapter, chapter 4, from the book The World's Greatest Ghost by Roger Bohr. This one having to do with the fascinating theme that's called Ghosts of the Deep. In other words, ghosts that are linked to bodies of water like oceans or rivers, lakes, and so on. There's going to be a good number of segments to feature here, so I can't wait to showcase them, and then I'll give my own thoughts and opinions. For example, the precursor here states, for centuries, seafarers have returned to port to tell salty tales of life on the ocean waves, their fireside stories of daring deeds, strange countries, and weird monsters enthrall generations of landlubbers. Today, we know that many of those tales were pure fantasy, but we also know that some stories of baffling events are factual, that when it comes to ghosts, past and present, stranger things really have happened at sea. Isn't that great stuff? So let me go ahead and I'll start the first couple of segments here with this part, and then I'll give my thoughts and opinions. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are too. First segment is called Unexpected Guest for Tea, and here's what it says. A tea party was taking place at the home of Vice Admiral Sir George and Lady Tryon in London's fashionable Eaton Square. The mansion was crowded with the cream of the capital society. Sir George, in full-dress uniform, walked down the graceful curved staircase towards his guests. Lady Tryon dropped her teacup and screamed. The guests watched aghast as the famous admiral reached the foot of the stairs, calmly and silently crossed the room, opened the door, and was gone. It was June 22nd, 1893, and the guests knew that they had just seen a ghost. For that day, Sir George was on the bridge of his flagship Victoria off Tripoli and tragically was guiding her into one of Britain's greatest naval disasters. His squadron steamed along in two columns as part of a carefully planned fleet exercise. Victoria led one of the columns, with the Camperdown heading the other. The naval squadron consisted of Britain's entire Mediterranean fleet, 8 ironclad battleships and 5 cruisers. Sir George's plan called for the two columns to move within 6 cable lengths of each other. Steaming ahead on parallel courses, they would turn inward on command and then reverse course. But were 6 cable lengths, about 4,500 feet, enough? One officer meekly suggested that the two columns could come dangerously close to a collision. The Vice Admiral agreed that perhaps there should be 8 cable lengths. However, within minutes, he again mysteriously changed his mind, ordering the maneuver to go ahead as planned. There was later testimony that his eyes were strangely dull when he reissued that order. At a combined speed of 18 knots, the two lead ships were heading toward each other on a collision course, yet Sir George gave no signal for the turn. He stood like a statue on the chart house deck, his eyes still vague. When other officers pleaded that they must do something, the admiral failed to answer. At the very last moment, he shook himself like a waking dreamer and whispered, "Yes, go astern," but the order was given too late. Even with the propellers in reverse, the Victoria's momentum carried her like a juggernaut towards the Camperdown. As buglers sounded the call summoning all hands on deck, the ironclads met in a terrifying collision. Camperdown pierced the flagship some 65 feet aft of the bow on the starboard side. A dreadful shudder racked the Victoria. The ship's pumps might have coped with the torrents of water, but compounding his first ghastly mistake with another, the admiral shouted at Camperdown, "Go astern with both engines." As the great ship backed away, the fate of the Victoria was inevitable. The flagship was swamped by a wall of water that flooded everything in its way, men, machinery, and bulkheads. The ship's hydraulic system was submerged, and below decks, hundreds of men were caught in the smothering assault of the sea water. When the order came to report topside, many were either dead or dying in flooding compartments. Among the 600 who leapt from the ship, many were ground to fragments in the propeller blades or trapped in the suction of the foundering Victoria. A total of only 25 officers and 259 men were picked up by the boats, with 22 officers and 336 seamen dead. Among the dead was Sir George Tryon himself, who was still standing on the Victoria's bridge when she slipped beneath the waves. Next one is called Spirit of the Deep, Trailed by a Ghostly Galleon. If there are ghosts of people who die, can ships also become spirits too? Captain Dusty Miller came close to answering that question, but he took his knowledge to a watery grave when his yacht, the Joyita, sank in 1955. For in the months before his last voyage in the South Seas, something unknown had stalked him and his ship. Passengers reported that another ship was following in their wake, moving along mysteriously through the darkness with no lights or sound. The ghostly ship had a high superstructure aft, they said, but otherwise could describe her only as looking like an ancient galleon from the time of Columbus. When Captain Miller glimpsed her in his binoculars on a voyage to Pago Pago, his face turned deadly white. He ordered the running lights turned off and took over the helm himself, heading the Joyita into a squall. When the weather cleared, there was no sign of the ghostly galleon. The Joyita had the reputation of being an unlucky yacht, and Dusty knew this when he first bought her. Roland West, a film producer with RKO Studios, had built her in the first blaze of Hollywood's glory and renamed her Joyita, Spanish for Little Jewel, in honor of his actress sweetheart, Jewel Carmen. The romance fizzled and bad luck began to haunt the yacht even before her launching in 1931. Workmen fell from the rigging and died. The Portuguese widow of one victim publicly laid a curse on the yacht and its owner. On her maiden voyage to Catalina Island, the ship was towed back into port after a disastrous engine room fire. The Joyita was sold and then went into charter service. The great stars of the screen were among those who sailed in her, but when a passenger mysteriously vanished, nobody wanted to know the boat anymore. The United States Navy took her over in World War II, but put her back on dry dock when she kept running aground. Even out of service, her record was grim. A caretaker died from battery acid fumes, there was a series of unexplained fires, and 2 men were killed in a fight aboard her. Sold as war surplus, the now shabby yacht went from owner to owner. Dusty Miller bought her with his last few dollars. On October 3rd, 1955, the Joyita was put to sea for the last time from Apia Harbor in western Samoa. Held in port by order of unhappy creditors, she had almost rusted away for months before Miller could persuade them to let him take her out. The Joyita carried desperately needed food and medical supplies for the islanders of Fakaofo, 200 miles north, and she was to bring back 70 tons of copra. Besides the crew of 16, there were 9 passengers. Samoans living on the waterfront later claimed that minutes after her departure, they saw a huge, dark vessel gliding in Joyita's wake. She was enormously high aft and unlike any ship seen in those waters. She was traveling without lights and with no sound of motors, but she moved at an incredible speed. Nothing was heard of the Joyita until November 10, 1955, when another freighter found her lying abandoned 90 miles north of Fiji. She had a 55-degree list to port, and one rail was awash. Radio gear was smashed, the logbook was missing, and there was no recognizable message, but carefully placed signal flags in the rigging spelled out the letters WNQV. To this day, investigators have not been able to discover what this may have meant. No bodies were found in the flooded compartments, and the fate of the 25 persons aboard is still unknown. In Suva, where the wreck was pumped out, marine inspectors found no answers. The tale of the mysterious ship was put down to native superstition, although it had been government men aboard the Joyita who had first reported the ghostly vessel. But the sailors of the South Sea ports still had no doubts. They still see a clear link between the doomed Joyita and the strange dark galleon from another age. And then the next segment is actually a mini one. It's called Cross of Mystery. 2 boats went to the aid of a strange vessel which was obviously in distress in heavy seas off the coast of Devon in 1959. As they came close to the vessel, they were able to identify it as a World War II landing craft. The flag that it was flying was the Cross of Lorraine, the symbol of the Free French forces. As the 2 boats came still closer, the ship was obscured from a view by a sudden giant wave, and it never reappeared. And then the next segment is a regular one called The Phantom Dutchman, how a king saw a cursed ship. At 4 a.m., the Flying Dutchman crossed our bows. She emitted a strange phosphorescent light as of a phantom ship all aglow, in the midst of which light the mast, spars, and sails of a brig 200 yards distant stood out in strong relief as she came up on the port bow, where the officer watched from the bridge saw her, as did the quarterdeck midshipman, who was sent forward at once to the forecastle. But on arriving, there was no vestige nor any sign whatsoever of any material ship, at least that was to be seen near or right away to the horizon, the night being clear and the sea calm. This unusual apparition was reported in those words by a 16-year-old Royal Navy midshipman aboard the British warship Inconstant, steaming off the coast of Australia on July 11, 1881. The report might have been put down to the lad's age, inexperience, and a youthful imagination, except for one thing. The midshipman was none other than Prince George, later to become King George V of England. The vision was also seen by 13 other men aboard the Inconstant and 2 sister ships. Later that day, the seaman who had first reported her fell to his death from a mast stop. Some weeks later, the admiral of the fleet died. Over the years, the seagoing belief that bad fortune will dog anyone who sights the Flying Dutchman has often been fulfilled. So what, or perhaps was, the Flying Dutchman? The name originates from the 17th century when an unscrupulously greedy Dutch captain, Hendrik van der Decken, set sail from Amsterdam to seek his fortune in the East Indies. The voyage went smoothly until the Dutch East Indiaman was rounding the Cape of Good Hope. A fierce storm blew up, ripping the ship's sails to shreds and battering her creaking timbers, but the determined captain pressed on, ignoring the pleas of his crew. What became of him and his ship is not known, but legend has it that the devil appeared to the captain and urged him to challenge God's will and sail straight into the storm. The Dutchman agreed and brought upon himself the curse of the Almighty, that he and his ship of living dead should roam the seas without ever making landfall until the day of judgment. Most sightings of the Flying Dutchman have been made in the area where legend says she vanished, around the Cape of Good Hope. The phantom vessel has even been spotted from shore. In March 1939, some 100 people saw the phantom East Indiaman. They were all sunbathing on Glencairn Beach in False Bay, southeast of Cape Town, when a fully rigged sailing ship appeared out of the heat haze. It passed across the bay with its sails full, although there was not a breath of wind. The ship seemed to be heading for a distant, isolated beach. But as the crowd of excited witnesses looked on, the mysterious Flying Dutchman vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. In September 1942, 4 people were relaxing on the terrace of their home at Moye Point, Cape Town, when they spotted an ancient sailing ship heading into Table Bay. They followed its progress for about 15 minutes before it disappeared from view behind Robben Island. The story of the Flying Dutchman is fanciful enough. It inspired Wagner's famous opera, but when witnesses of the ghost ship include a future king of England, the sea's beloved ghost legend becomes difficult to dismiss as just another sailor's yarn. And then there's again another mini segment called The Ghostly Jailer. A phantom policeman patrols the Vine Street Police Station in London city of Westminster. Station Sergeant Goddard hanged himself in one of the cells in the early years of the century, but officers have frequently seen him pounding corridors, opening locked cell doors, and rifling through documents. And with that, let's go ahead and let's pause it here, and then we'll talk about this chapter, part 1, Ghost of the Deep, again involving Ghost of the Seas. So the first one is The Uninvited Guest for Tea. I've heard of that story. I think I even actually talked about it. It sounds very familiar in one of my videos. Maybe I didn't talk about it 100%, but I remember that there was that story of that admiral who something happened to him at sea, and then he was seen walking down a staircase, pretty much right then and there, same day, even though everyone knew that he had just died. What a sad way to go, though, for all those men. Who knows what happened to that admiral, like what he was thinking. Apparently that, his eyes were reported as being glazed over, like he was either lost in thought or something else. But his decision, his reckless decision to, again, have the boats basically come within 6 cable lengths. It's like, why? Like, why not have it be 10 just to be safe than sorry? Caused the entire 2 set of ships to collide. And then when that happened, that ended up sealing the fate for almost 300 men, all because of one simple decision. Makes me wonder, those of you that are involved in naval forces, like what happens in that situation if you notice that your superior is about to do something really bad. Like he's giving an order and it's really bad and it could easily cost the lives of everyone on board. Can people just supersede it? Like what happens at that point? But in this case, nobody did. And when that happened, then obviously those men just basically ended up dying for nothing. Especially imagine the ones that were deep underneath, like basically in the levels underneath the ship. No chance whatsoever. All they saw or would have seen was a flood of water suddenly coming towards them in their cramped bunks, and they would have not had a single chance. The next one is involves Spirit of the Deep, the ghostly galleon. That was pretty interesting. The idea that you have a ship from the time of Columbus that apparently is haunting another ship that is cursed, the Joyita. Apparently this is a ship, the Joyita, that had a lot of bad experiences, some deaths associated with it too. And then because of it, now it had this other cursed ship or haunted ship following it as well. In a weird way, it reminded me of Event Horizon. Remember that ship? The one that went into the other dimension, so-called dimension from hell, and then came back. And whoever came across it now all of a sudden had this bad luck or had this evilness following it. That's what it reminded me of too. I might do a story on it then. I'll see if there's enough interest. And the last one is the Phantom Dutchman. I've heard of this name. I haven't heard of the story, but now it looks like it's there. Like obviously it's a ship that for whatever reason, this once again a captain decided to basically do something reckless, and in this case the devil visited him as well and pretty much egged him on. Because of that, the ship went down, he went down, and now it's cursed to be the living dead, basically roaming the seas. And then that way, until whatever else happens with the world, like essentially it's out there forever. I have heard about the many encounters that people have had as well. A lot of them seem to happen before the time of instant cameras. I'm wondering now if people have seen them today. This Flying Dutchman, especially with everyone having smartphones and ready to take videos and ready to take pictures. I'm wondering if anyone can capture it today. Interesting stuff. Let me know what you guys think about this chapter so far too. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.